Hi there and welcome. Having mentioned in passing in my previous video and in several comment replies that I am not following the Thirlwall inquiry, I thought it only fair to say why. When the Thirlwall inquiry was first announced in the autumn of 2023, I was very excited, as I imagine all persons believing Miss Letby to be innocent or simply having concerns about the safety of the convictions would have been. For me, however, that excitement turned to disappointment, shortly followed by dismay, as I listened to Lady Justice Thirlwall's first official statement on the terms of reference of her inquiry. What she said, as far as I was concerned, boiled down to this. Her inquiry would be giving a big swerve to anything that might raise questions about the criminal prosecution of Miss Letby. Her pointed dismissal of the legitimate concerns of thinking, morally engaged people about the case as noise was especially insightful, as was the accompanying virtue signalling in relation to the parents. That most conservative of positions, though flying in the face of all reasonable expectations, may have, for me, retained a shred of credibility had she shown the grace of at least saying what it was that people were making noise about. For me, such an inquiry could never meet the standard of an honest one, so I have avoided following it with the same almost religious zeal as I avoid the papers and the likes of the BBC. I will take being in a state of knowing uninformedness over being in a state of unknowing misinformedness any day of the week. Alternative media and intuitions are safer bets. What is the point of doing an inquiry if you are going to treat the central, most interesting question that your inquiry is the best means of shedding light on as already closed? I'm not seeking to deny that Miss Letby's convictions are a legal reality, but when did legal reality supplant actual reality? How can legal reality displace lived reality in a search for truth? Last time I looked, that was the primary purpose of initiating a public inquiry. The lived reality here in the last knockings of 2024 means that in refusing to step outside the legal reality, the Thirlwall inquiry is premised on the most openly contested version of history since mass literacy became a thing over 150 years ago. To say the quiet part out loud, to start subordinating lived reality to legal reality in a matter as important as this is to be taking as your role model the totalitarian states of the 20th century rather, not the tradition that goes back to Magna Carta and is rooted in common law principles of right and wrong and fairness. The fact is, this inquiry is even called into question from a logical standpoint within the same version of reality in which it is an unchallengeable assumption that Miss Letby killed those babies. Consider the following point. Why bother doing an inquiry into the Countess of Chester if you already have your explanation for the spike in deaths? The presence of a serial killer is as definitive an extraordinary occurrence as you could imagine. It is not something the hierarchy at the hospital could have been reasonably expected to manage. It is not something any hospital management could reasonably be expected to have contingencies in place to pick up or otherwise mitigate. It is a one-off. So what is there to look for? To take that point one step further, having found a serial killer as the explanation for the spike in deaths at the Countess of Chester, wouldn't the money being spent inquiring into that particular unit not be much better spent looking into the much greater spike in deaths at the Sherwood Forest hospitals in 2014? If the explanation for the Countess of Chester spike is a serial killer, it logically follows the explanation for an even greater spike must also be a serial killer. I know about Sherwood Forest because I was lucky enough to come across a statistical study of neonatal deaths across England for the period, I think, 2014 to 2017. It was based on numbers from the Office of National Statistics and also from a kind of a very reputable kind of, I suppose it's an NGO, definitely got links to Oxford University. It's something which I'm sure many of you with a medical background will be familiar with. Something called the title is Mothers and Babies Reducing Risk Through Audits and Confidential Inquiries. The acronym for it is EMBRACE. That's like embrace, but without an E and with two R's, as in, you know, I'll spell it out. MBRRACE. Anyway, I'll include the link to the study in my description, provided that doing so does not prevent the video from being published by YouTube. Anyway, 2015 was the worst year at the Countess of Chester, with nine baby deaths. That converts to 2.96 deaths per 1,000 live births. Sherwood Forest in 2014 saw 13 neonatal deaths. That converts to 3.77 deaths per 1,000 live births. If a rise to 2.96 per 1,000 live births in one hospital means a serial killer was active, how then does a greater rise, 3.77 per 1,000 live births, not also scream for the same serial killer explanation? Maybe even two serial killers. How is it that after the decision that a serial killer was the only possible explanation for the Countess of Chester spike, Nottinghamshire Police was not immediately ordered to launch an investigation at Sherwood Forest? All right, let's not go there for the time being, although it is an entirely legitimate question. Coming back to my basic argument, the cogency of this argument is enhanced by the fact that although total births at the two hospitals are in the same ballpark, Sherwood Forest in 2014 had 3,456. Countess of Chester in 2015 had 3,047. So they're in the same ballpark. But Sherwood Forest then, at that time, was, and possibly still is, I don't know, a level 1 unit, whereas Countess of Chester is, of course, a level 2. Now, without overstating the obvious here, that means that at Sherwood Forest you had no seriously premature babies being born, or births involving mothers where there was anything about their anything about the pregnancy or the mother's state of health to suggest that the birth might be problematic. Those facts in turn necessarily means that for any random 1,000 births you could care to review at the two locations, the expectation would have to be, and this has to be, this must be a statistically significant thing, although I'm not a statistician, but it has to be. The expectation would be that you would have to find a lower mortality rate at Sherwood. So, the only possible explanation of the Nottingham deaths, this is within the serial killer version of reality which Thirlwall is using, which does not involve a Nottingham serial killer, would be the argument that the same serial killer, i.e. Miss Letby, must be responsible for the deaths at both locations. That would of course involve her slipping out of training at the Liverpool Women's Hospital, which I believe is where she was in 2014, nipping down to Nottingham, sneaking into that neonatal unit in order to kill those babies. Oh, I know I said we're not going to go there, but please note that even in this fanciful scenario, there would still be a necessity for Nottingham police to go in there, into that hospital to investigate those deaths, even if we assume that Miss Letby had got in there and done them. Anyway, those are the reasons I distrust the Thirlwall inquiry and therefore choose not to follow it. Money is being spent, so the inquiry obviously has a purpose or purposes. Whatever those purposes are, consistent with Lady Justice Thirlwall's own words, I strongly suspect they are more concerned to not get to the bottom of events that resulted in police being called into the hospital than in actually getting to the bottom of those events. Anyway, that's what I had to say. Please feel free to share your thoughts and any information that you have that you feel might be of interest to myself or anybody else viewing the video in the comments below. And as usual, thank you for your time, thank you for watching, and all the best.